a thought entered my mind today with this. They always tell us in school, that we're gonna need or utilize certain things. Like they tell you, hey, every day you're going to use algebra in the world, and you really don't. I mean, we don't see it at all. And so, talking with Steph this morning, she said something that really amused me. She said, all those years ago in history, when they talked about the Aegean Sea and all of those other things, she said, I should have paid attention, but I never knew that I'd ever be here, to actually have a need to watch for it. I say all that to say this: what an amazing trip! I know everybody, anyone that could come up here and take these mics would say the same thing. It's been an experience of a lifetime, not only to see the things that are here. For me, my passion to eat some of the food that was here, but also to witness what we read, what we know, what God's already proved in our heart, to see it realized out for us with actual evidence of the events that we see within His Word. So today, everybody's kind of stepped on each other's toes. It's just the nature of it when we cover it. I like to cover a little bit about Corinth itself, but I really want to get into the mindset, if we can, a little bit of how Paul was, I feel like, when he came here. I think it's important for us to understand what the Lord did for him and what He does for us. So Corinth was a small dynasty and territory in Greece, bounded on the east by the Gulf of Saron, and on the south by the kingdom of Argos, on the west by Sion, and on the north by the kingdom of Megaris. And its upper part of the isthmus, or the Bay of Corinth, is now called the Gulf of Lepanto. The city of Corinth, the capital of this region, stood near the middle of the isthmus, where we're at today, which is the narrowest part, about 6 miles wide, although somewhat wider where Corinth itself stood. Corinth was the most prosperous of the commercial cities of Greece, made so by the preference of the traders between Asia and Italy to carry their goods across the isthmus rather than risk the great perils of sailing around the Peloponnesian Peninsula. A natural carrying place for the Ionian Sea on the west to the Aegean on the east. Many efforts were made by the Greeks and subsequently by the Romans to find a way to transfer goods across that, with the Romans even looking for a way to transfer the sea vessels themselves, that 6 mile stretch, and roll them across the land. Corinth then exceeds all of the cities in the world for its splendor and its magnificence of its public buildings, like temples, palaces, theaters, baths, and other edifices, all enhanced with beautiful columns, capitals, and bases. Corinth also was celebrated for its statues, especially those of Venus, the Sun, Neptune, Aphrodite, Dinah, Apollo, Jupiter, and Minerva. The temple of Venus was not only very splendid and rich, but maintained by 1,000 prostitutes that took care of that temple. And why that's important is I want you to think about the heresy that's here, about the sin that was so prevalent as Paul rolled into the city. And we've already heard the success that he had and the teachings that Will gave to us, and how prosperous God made it. But I don't ever want it to overshadow how evil and how wicked certain parts of the city were. But in the course we know of the second missionary journey, then Paul passes from Athens here to Corinth. And all of those that were here, honestly, would not have taken great care or attention to him because, again, the magnitude of the people that would have been coming into the city. In fact, it struck me, and Will read it earlier, how plainly it's declared in chapter 18, verse 1. It says, after these things, again, talking about the events in Athens, he departs from Athens and came to Corinth. But I want us to think about this. What was the catalyst in him leaving? We hear about wild successes as it happens, but I want us to think back to Athens. And again, Will spoke on this and probably considered it, but Mars Hill was no great success. Now, we covered there were a couple whose lives were changed, but there were others that openly laughed him to scorn. Now, we don't see in this, and somewhat you have to consider and just imagine, if you will, what was the catalyst for him leaving? Now, I believe he was a spiritual man, and the works that he did was evident in that. Perhaps the Lord said it's time, but I also believe that one of the motivations would have had to have been discouragement on his part. If any one of us would have spoken there like he did and had the reception that he did, think about how that would have cut your legs out from underneath you. I mean, have you ever tried to talk to someone that's lost and bring Jesus to them and they seem disinterested? Have you ever thought, I'm going to step up and I'm going to go to this one or that one, and I'm going to say I want to volunteer, and your ideas or your participation is rejected? Have you ever spoken like this? And I would guarantee that if we went around and talked to the different ones that spoke, I guarantee you that after they were done, to some degree or another, including Will, including Hoy, including myself, you feel discouraged. So I want to show to us then what exactly happens to him. Because unlike in Athens, Paul hears clearly from the Lord. In verses 9 and 10, God speaks in part. It says, "Be not afraid, but speak, and hold not your peace. For I am with thee, and no man shall set on thee to hurt thee, for I have much people in this city." And so how reassuring for us to know that God will reassure us when we need to be reassured. Now, I can't stand up in front of you and not tell the story. That's just who I am. So in Tampa, when we first came, we had yet to take membership, but Stephanie and I were pretty well determined that we were going to take membership. Ron had paid us enough money for us to stay. But when we were there and we were going to do it and take membership, I had no appointments to preach anywhere. And I can remember Satan being discouraging to me at my house. And I was all alone. Stephanie had taken off, I think, to do some things, probably shopping with you ladies if I know her. But I want to give you an example of how the Lord speaks, because you say, "Jeff, I've never heard him clearly speak to me." But the Lord speaks to us through other people all the time. And they are sitting at the house. And unlike Brett, I'm not going to make any promises that I won't cry. I know that I will. But there at the house, my phone went off, and it was a text from Jeremy Craddock, who at the time was pastor at St. Pete Church. And he asked me if I could come and I could preach at his church. I no sooner answered that with enthusiasm than my phone rang, and it was Jim Jordan from Haines City Church who told me, "I'm going to be going out of town on this date, and I need you to come and preach." I kid you not, and no sooner did I hang up that phone than Roger McClellan reached out and said, "I need you at Calvary Church." And you say, "I'm discouraged, Lord. I don't know if I'm where I am, doing what I am, when I need to be doing it." And I promise you, every single time, the Lord will send help to you. What was that help for Paul? Not just the Lord pronouncing that, but he talked about the two that he ran into. See, God will bolster us with other people that uplift us. So it's not only important for us to see when God's moving and when he's working and be aware of those things in our lives, it's equally important for each one of us to be that person. If God calls you forth and says, "Hey, go be an encourager," just go to this one and say, "I'm glad that you're working for the Lord. You've really inspired me. I'm thankful for the efforts that you're doing. Boy, your speech was amazing." Whatever that was. I was glad when your song ended. You can sing that again. But when we do those things, we become the voice of God for someone who's discouraged and struggling. So I want to talk about this and I'll be done. So then, much said about, and Will quoted from them, the books of the 1st and 2nd Corinthians that he wrote after that. We know when we were there at Ephesus that Paul finishes and writes those in 59 AD. We know that Paul was not only the church founder, but as he was here, he stayed in closest relation to it, probably of all the churches. This church ignited his concerns. It demanded his management, tried his patience and mercy, and rewarded him with evidence of his affection and obedience, and filled him with hope by its extended and nourishing influence to others. His love here was of special intensity. It was like a father's love to a son who was hampered with temptations. This son personified in the church as it combined great merits along with great defects. The important thing to remember about why this church was important, it was one that was immersed with the sins of the world that was around it. And so as we struggle and we say, how do we live in a world that doesn't believe just like us? The example is Corinth, as God did great things in Corinth, and he can do those same things through us. Because we see then in those two epistles, I'm almost done, special focus in reference to all practical measures in the establishments of the church among the ungodly, and how that same church in that environment should then behave. So these writings are the most important portions of the Word of God for each one of us who try to live in a sin-filled world. Why? Here's some verses. You could not possibly make a list. Here's some verses found that we find in Corinthians. Love is patient. Love is kind. Do everything in love. And now these three things remain: faith, hope, and love. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Those are verses that are found and contained within these letters. Do you not know that evildoers will not inherit the kingdom of God? And here, one great one that we encourage ourselves at funerals and all other environments: look not at things that are seen, but those things that are eternal. Amen. How much did Paul bless us as a church today by the writings that he did and the works that he accomplished here? And it was through a great wave, I believe, of discouragement as he initially came. How much more can God do with each one of us when we don't allow our situation to discourage us, but stand firm in the Lord? Thank you, guys.